Alrighty folks, welcome back to the channel. Got an interesting video for you today. This is something that I've been wanting to try for quite a while. We are talking about op-amp rolling. Specifically, we're talking about op-amp rolling with the Fosi ZA3. Now I'm going to drop a link down to my original review to the ZA3. It was more like a initial impressions because I wanted to really flesh out like this review because I love this amp and it's got a lot of potential because you can run it mono, you can run it stereo, and then there's all sorts of op amps that you can swap in there. So we're going to talk op amps today and my experience with rolling op amps in the ZA3. So I have several different ones that I was able to acquire to try. So and we'll talk about each of those and how they compare to stock. It was nice because I have two ZA3s, one that Fosi sent me that I'm keeping, and then one that I purchased myself so I could do this testing and then run a mono as well. So I feel like I'm in a pretty good position to give a good opinion on op amps here. And I've never messed with op amps before. I have done tube rolling. I would say it's pretty similar, honestly, if it comes down to it. And so I'll give you just kind of my initial impressions of each of these op amps and just the overall experience of op amp rolling here. Before we go any further, I do have one big recommendation to make. So this is an op amp puller, and this I would recommend. You can buy these. They come in like sets of 2 on Amazon, and they're like $6. But if you're going to be doing any of this, you're definitely going to want one of these. Kind of the biggest finicky thing with op amps is, especially if you're looking at like these cheaper guys here, is the pins are so delicate that it can just be difficult to it can just be difficult to get them in to the right spot and then not like bend the crap out of those pins when you're pulling them around. So a little puller like this definitely helps a lot. Recommended. Now that being said, let's go ahead and just jump into my testing here, and I'm going to refer to my notebook here because it's depending on the op amps, it can make a pretty big difference or not much of a difference. Okay. So, and then just in my build quality experience, most op amps are pretty small and cheap, right? Like this is a pretty typical op amp right here. Sparkos did send me a handful of op amps so I could do some good testing with it, and they did send these to me. They're not asking for me to say anything specific about it or anything like that, but you can just tell immediately that their op amps are different and special. So like look at how beefy this Sparkos op amp is. It's got like 2 PCBs on it, and just the pins are way sturdier. They look like they're gold plated. It's just let alone sound, but just working with the Sparkos op amps was much nicer than working with the cheap ones, just so you know. So the first comparison I did was with the Sparkos, and so I got stock versus Sparkos. Now my initial impression of the ZA3 with the stock op amps, and to be clear, the only ones I'm rolling are the left and right channel. There's an XLR one that can be rolled, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, and then there's like a couple for the sub too that can be rolled as well. I only mess with the RCA ones and just that main right-left channel, so I didn't play with the XLR. Maybe I will in the future, or maybe I'll play with the sub out too, but just not for this time. I had to keep it manageable. So initial impression of the ZA3 stock is I find it a little bit dry, and I said that in my initial review of it. The mids I find to be a little bit forward. Now, just so you know my system, I've got a pair of Emotiva T0 Plus towers, and then I've got one Yamo C910 sub, and then I've got a 12-inch sub that I built myself that I'm running with an IEMA A07. So that's how my system is. So just think of it, just so you have context of what this sounds like. And the DAC is a Songcause SGD1. Okay, so anyway, mids a little dry, mids a bit forward. not the most dynamic sound in the world. I didn't feel like. More like it has a little bit of like a piercing quality to it is how I would phrase it. And you'll hear me say that a little bit more in this. It's not like with the stock op amps, it's not terrible, but it is there a little bit. And the stock op amps are they are the, let me see if I can read this. It's quite difficult to read these op amps numbers on here, but it is the NE5532P. That's what comes stock in the Fosi. So a little dry, a little piercing, not the most dynamic thing in the world. Switching over to the Sparkos, I said I felt like there was noticeably better resolution in the high frequencies. I thought that it was smoother and more natural, and I wrote down here no doubt in my mind that that was the case. So I do really think, especially in the top end, that the Sparkos is noticeably better resolution, doesn't have that same piercing quality to it, tons of clarity and resolution. I was impressed. The rest of the range, I'm not sure I noticed a ton of difference, but certainly on the top end there. And I didn't feel like the mids were as forward either. So then I bought a pair of reasonably priced ones from Amazon, and these are the LM4562NA op amps, and it was like 2 for $16, so not terrible. Keep in mind those Sparkos op amps, they're like $70-80 a piece, so that's definitely something to consider for sure. So these LM op amps, I thought they seemed duller than the stock op amps or the Sparkos op amps. I did think it had some nice bass texture though, like noticeably different bass texture in a good way. And but I did really think there was less resolution on the top specifically, but kind of just in general, it didn't seem like it had as much resolution to me. And then I also just put it seemed like more of a warm kind of enveloping sound to it. So losing out on clarity and resolution, but you get this nice bit of like warmth and bass texture to it. So I thought those were decent, and that's one that I would be curious to put on the sub output and see how it performs. But you know, maybe we'll see what happens in the future. I switched then back to stock op amps from those LMs, and I thought, yeah, similar resolution really, but more forward. Definitely those stock op amps are more forward, those NE5532s or whatever they are. Obviously, I underlined this and I wrote it and I put obviously different sounding, right? Like that was kind of, because that's kind of one of the things that I wanted to test with this is like, is it even like noticeable? And I put, yeah, it is obviously different sounding with these different op amps. So it is noticeable for sure. And again, I felt like the stock just had a piercing quality to it. Now I had a friend of the channel recommend me some other op amps on Amazon that are fairly cheap. So these are the JRC 4558 op amps, and these suckers are cheap. They're like, I don't even know how many of them. I'll link to all this stuff on Amazon, but it was like $7.50 and you get like, I don't know, like 20 of them or something like that. So they're super cheap. And he highly recommended them, but I thought they sounded pretty similar to stock. I put nothing really stood out to me good or bad about them a whole lot. They did seem more forward to me, kind of like the stock op amps in the ZA3, and I didn't feel like they felt like nearly as nuanced as those LM ones, and especially as the Sparkos op amps. Then I switched back to the Sparkos from those, and I thought just tighter, more controlled, more confident without being like pushing it in your face is what I thought it sounded like. Just better clarity, but felt also just less forced with the Sparkos. And for me, I noted just that I felt like I could, and for me, I just noted that I felt like with the Sparkos, I could just dive a little bit deeper into the tracks. Like it wasn't so in my face. I could go access it as I pleased. So in a nutshell, that's my review of op amps. Is they definitely make a difference. The Sparkos op amps I think are fantastic. They are miles better built than any of these other ones, and I don't know if I'd say miles better in sound quality, but definitely better, I felt, at least in this application, than any of the other ones I tried. So spending that kind of money to upgrade a $150 amp, I don't know, that's going to be different for everybody. I do like that it's an option for people though. So this is something that I found interesting. I said I'd talk about the XLR just a little bit. Is when I switched from RCA to XLR using the Sparkos op amps with the L&R channel, at that point I felt like definitely higher volume was achievable, but I felt like it kind of became piercing again. And again, that was running through one of the stock op amps and then through the Sparkos, if I understand the amp topology correctly. So they definitely make a difference, right? Like all these little op amps make a difference. So I would say that's the impression I'm left with, is that op amps do make a difference. It's worth probably playing around a little bit with them. If you can find several different cheap sets, fantastic, try them. You're not out much. If you feel like you go through those and you feel like you're not getting what you want, then maybe it is worth reaching out to somebody like Sparkos to see if what they have to offer is going to suit your needs. I certainly think the ZA3s in my system sound fantastic with the Sparkos op amps running in them, so I'm going to keep them. And then, like I said, maybe we'll even experiment with swapping some of those other ones out here in the future. But it was quite fun. I mean, all of this stuff for me is an experiment and a journey, and this is one of those rabbit holes that I hadn't gone down yet, but I'm glad that I had the opportunity to do it. So thanks to you guys for watching. Thank you to Sparkos for sending those op amps out for me to try. Thanks for the friend of the channel who recommended some other op amps to try, and we'll keep diving into these ZA3s. And I think the next video that we will do on it is we will talk about stereo versus mono and see how much of a difference is there. So stay tuned for that one. Appreciate you. Hopefully I'll see you in the next video.